Hi everyone. I'd like to dedicate my reading to the Ukrainian people, and I'd like to start with a minute's silence in solidarity, please. Thank you. I like to think I'm a poet, but all too often the world leaves me speechless. My silence expresses my feelings perfectly. No poem of mine could ever say it better. A haiku. War. Again. Again. War. Again. 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 War. Again. Again. Tonight I joined with people in a park in Ennis, County Clare, on the west coast of Ireland, where I live, and of course joined with people all over the world in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. It was heartbreaking to hear Ukrainians talking, Poles, Russians. I've chosen a very different set than I would normally do. But I hope you'll bear with me. You're just going to have to take me as you find me. Having said that, I usually start off with one particular poem, and I'm going to today. It's about the moment before we get creative, or the moment before we witness some other people being creative. And it's called Creativity. There is a moment, no, a millisecond, nestled softly between the lightning and the thunder, the birth and the cry, the caress and the sensation, delicate and silent, eclipsing bliss, a pure, vulnerable blink, a delicious expectation. As curtains part on the first night, or canvas shivers beneath burnt umber bristles, before the rosined bow kisses the string, as the pen quivers in the hand, when anything at all is possible. You asked me to warn you if about content. Well, I'm afraid that a lot of the content of what I'm reading is potentially traumatic, and I hope you're going to bear with me. There's a lot of difficult content that I've chosen to read today. This poem is about the famine in Ireland in the 1840s. It was more accurately described in the Irish language as the Great Hunger, an Gorta Mór. Many people died of starvation, and many more tried to get away and took to ships. A lot of them going to America, and they were known as coffin ships for obvious reasons. And all she heard was the sea, the endless sea. And through it all, she sang as she wept, hanging on for dear life to her dream of safety. And she cradled her last two surviving children, and the longing for home, and the loss, and the grief, and the hunger, and the anger. Her cabin home crumbled by landlords' lackeys in league with the RIC, Royal Irish Constabulary. The horrors of the workhouse, the long walk to the sea, and the lonely wait for the boarding. 1 foot on that gangplank, and she knew in her heart that there would be no going back ever. And so, deep down below in the dark, crowded hold, through a thin crack in the hull, she clung to the disappearing shore and all she'd been forced to leave behind. Muffled voices, fading faces she would never meet again. Her spirit, strong as the mast, her body frail and broken. Sickening rations, filthy water, the stench like the rotting haggard, screaming baby, wet blanket, still, silent child. Now, weeks into the voyage, snatches of lost songs learned at her mother's knee merge with the sound of timbers creaking to the rhythm of a horror hornpipe. Huge, hungry waves and howling winds whip the sails, haunt the ship, the sailors' cries, the sunken eyes, the sea waters rising, ship listing, faith fading, hope sinking, dream turned to nightmare, just time enough for one last pitiful prayer, drowned by the storm, lost at sea. This next poem is called Journey. It's an imagined journey. Sorry, I've got lost. That isn't what I want to do at all. What I want to do is a poem called Going Over and Over Again. It's an emigration poem. It starts in the same place, really. 1850. Then it was a sailing ship, and you, in rags, in chains, clutching a filthy sack, in tears at the harbour in Kappa, County Clare, sentenced for stealing to penal servitude, far from home in Van Diemen's Land. 1915. And then it was an army lorry, and you just enlisted, heading for the front in British khaki uniform, clutching a kit bag and a rifle, in tears, leaving Killaloe, County Clare, sentenced to death by poverty, and sympathy for the underdog, and revenge for the sinking of the Lusitania, to defend gallant little Belgium against the German invaders, to fight the Great War, the war to end all wars. Far from home, in a trench in France. 1950, and then it was a bus, and you in your Sunday best, clutching a flimsy suitcase, in tears by the roadside in Ennis, County Clare, sentenced to search for work on building site or motorway, underground or hospital, far from home, to Holyhead, then Kilburn or Coventry. 2010, and now it's a plane, and you in trainers and a hoodie, clutching your degree and visa and laptop, in tears at the airport in Shannon, County Clare, sentenced to sell your skills in offices and schools and building sites and hospitals, far from home, to Heathrow, Toronto, Boston or Sydney. 2050. The next one is called Things That Are Tough at the Moment. I wrote this in 2010. Things are tough at the moment, but I'm not walking half the day in the blazing sun with a pot on my head for mile on weary, searing mile through scrub and desert, dignified and focused and patient, just praying that the water hole hasn't dried up again. I'm not on my knees, hands tied behind my back, bag over my head, beaten senseless with a rubber hose. I'm not selling myself in stinking back streets, behind the shacks, between the craters and the open sewer. I'm not choosing which of my children to sacrifice so the rest of us have some chance to make it. I'm not fleeing my home, desperately risking my life, crammed aboard a smuggler's sinking ship. I'm not queuing for the gas chamber. I'm not running napalmed up the road. I'm not searching through the rubble for survivors. I'm not blinded under a mushroom cloud. I'm not starving so thin that my skin has turned to paper, too weak to flick the flies from my eyes. I'm not clutching my baby to my breast, searching frantically through the smoke for cover from the bombardment. I'm not stuck in the workhouse, breaking rocks for a famine road and rocking back and forth, screaming through the night. I'm not rotting in a hidden mass grave. Yeah, things are tough at the moment. Unemployment, negative equity, emigration, slashed budgets for hospitals and schools, forced deep cuts to skeleton services so we can pay over and over and over for fat cat bankers and big shot gamblers to laugh in our faces as they ride off into the sunset on the pig's back. But my belly is full. I have a roof over my head, water in my tap, and clothes on my back. Things are tough at the moment, but we do not suffer alone. All these things are connected. Here and there, then and now, we are all connected across a world that doesn't have to be this tough. I've been very affected by the war in Syria, and I have 3 poems that relate to that. Someone had the idea, I know what we'll do, and someone else agreed, and lots of people helped, and others watched approvingly, and some were forced to help, and others knew and watched and said nothing. And later, as people were murdered by banned chemical weapons, and thousands more were maimed, a young girl, in what remained of her green dress, sat propped up on the ground, dusty and bewildered. She looked into the TV camera and silently asked me, why? This next poem is called Journey. It's an imagined journey away from Syria to safety. Shh. Shh. Syria. Sacred, starry skies, sweet songs shared. Islam, Shia, Sunni, Sharia, IS, ISIL, ISIS, shadowy, shamed, shunned, shoved, shackled, stoned, shot, shooting, shuddering, shattered shards, shouting, shoveling, shell-shocked, shaking, sobbing, scared, sad songs shared. Ship, seas, smugglers, sharks, storms, shipwrecked, saved, shore, sand, showers, shivering, shaking, soaking, shabby skirts, shirts, shoes, scarred skin, sores, shade, shelter, stars, sky, sad songs shared, asylum-seeking sanctuary, safety, status, sweet, sad songs shared, silence, soothing, sleep. Shh. Shh. I think this next poem, Swallow, will explain itself. I'm from England with about 6 words of Arabic. He is from Syria, or Suria, as he says, with about 7 words of English. We meet often in our adopted country, in Ireland's beautiful west. He smiles and bids me welcome. I smile and fail to teach him English. A smile goes a very long way. We are united by many things, including post-traumatic stress disorder. We have shared the horror of our experiences in mime. Verbal language would be completely inadequate anyway. I will never forget the morning as we sat drinking kahawa coffee and watching scenes of total devastation from his home on Al Jazeera TV. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees to act out months of daily torture in prison. Mine is a result of a car crash, a high-speed head-on collision with a boy racer. I'm not comparing my trauma with his, but suffering is not a competition, and I understand the pain and the nightmares and the not sleeping and the flashbacks and the panic attacks and the depression. There is an expression in the Irish language, Ahnian Kirog, Kirog Ella. A beetle recognizes another beetle. We have a connection. And today, literally out of the blue, he and I were connected again by the forked tail of a May swallow flying overhead. I said swallow in English. He said sanunu in Arabic. We smiled, united by this beautiful bird. A smile, like a swallow, goes a long way. He pointed excitedly and grinned and said, Surya, and welcome. I wished that I could explain to him that watching swallows swooping in and out from their mud nest in the rafters of our farm shed is my very first memory of this world. I drew a map on his son's copybook. It showed Ireland and Syria and Cape Town at the southernmost tip of South Africa, a 12,000-mile round trip that this tiny bird takes each year, always returning to its homes. I tried to imagine the long journey my friend had taken from his home in Syria to Ireland. I wondered to myself if and when he and his family will ever fly home. The world has many languages. Most people understand swallow, sanunu.
Wow. Wow. I
I've two more poems, if that's okay. I'm not sure. How am I doing for time?
well, if you could do one, that would be great because you're a little over right now, but I'd rather have you do pick one that you feel is a nice finisher rather than just,
Okay,
just make that
okay.
stop.
I apologize for going over.
It's all right. I don't think anybody's anything anybody minds, and I'm glad you're here. Let me go back, mute me so you can have your time.
Uh, my mother died at the age of 97. And this poem is called Meetings in Memory of My Mother, Pamela Vernon, 1919 to 2017. My mother always remembered that in 1946, just after the Second World War, at a huge open-air gathering of thousands of people in Bombay, India, Gandhi began the meeting by calling for a long silence. She stood still, silently in the crowd, taking tiny black and white photographs with her box brownie camera. Later, after his speech, she joined the queue to meet him at the house where he was staying. She never forgot that day. And although, as far as I know, he never spoke of it again, somehow, I'm sure that in her own beautiful, strong, and gentle way, she was a small influence on him too. 60 years and more later, beside the bandstand in Horsham, England, she still stood silently in a small group of women and children who met on Saturdays to call for world peace. Thank you all very much.